Welcome to the First Mentor Podcast. Here, you will hear us talk about a variety of topics for the entire family that will hopefully spark a discussion, create a new curiosity, or simply teach you something new. The goal is to inspire you to learn life skills and soft skills not taught in school and prepare you to live an extraordinary life. Come on and spend some time with us on your commute to school or anytime you're free.
Hello, mentees, and thank you so much for joining us for episode 30 of the First Mentor Podcast. And this is your host and mentor, Vanessa Yang. And I'm really excited to have you with us as we speak with Kabir McNeely. He's an LGBTQ plus youth advocate who chooses to express his passion through acting and filmmaking. And through sharing his insight and experience, he's using his voice to create awareness, provide support, and break the stigma within the LGBTQ plus community. And at the end of this episode, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, add us to your favorite list, and tell your friends and family about First Mentor Podcast. And we would also love your comments in the review section of Apple Podcast. And without further ado, let's get started with our interview with Kabir. Welcome, everyone. And I wanted to introduce you to our guest today. And I want to welcome Kabir McNeely to our show. How are you, Kabir?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Great. Thanks for asking and thanks for joining us. I really feel like it's a great conversations we're going to have, and I'm really excited to have you with us. And I know you joined us for one of our other episodes as I was talking to Holly before, right? And you joined us for a little bit.
Yeah.
So you have great things coming, and I wanted to dive deeper in conversation with you today. But for those listeners who didn't have a chance to listen to the other episode, can you maybe share with them a little bit more about your background and what you do?
So I'm Kabir McNeely. I am an actor, filmmaker, the whole visual performing arts thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And last time we were mainly talking about adoption and the Mixed Roots Foundation. I've been involved with them since 2013, I believe, doing PSAs, campaigns for them. And so since then, I've sort of branched out and started to do my own work.
Yes, while going to school and everything. So
Yes.
In order for you to do something on the side besides going to school, and I'm a big supporter of doing more outside of school. I mean, most of us in the United States, especially, we go to school, study, do our homework, but then there's something, whether it's sports, whether it's any extracurricular activity. And for you, you choose to work in the entertainment industry, but add your own spin to it because you have control over what you do, right?
Right.
And I wanted to ask you, what type of words would you use to describe your identities, like who you are and what you associate yourself with? Because we all wear many different hats, right? When I would describe myself, I would say, I'm a mother, I'm a professional, I'm adding entrepreneur to my list, I'm a podcast host, I used to be an accountant, and I always tell my friends I'm a foodie because I love to eat. So there's a lot more and different identities we all have within ourselves. What words would you use to describe yourself?
Yeah, I would say adopted, definitely. I'm a son. I also have my own podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great. What's your podcast called, by the way?
The Kabir McNeely Show.
Oh, that's easy.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
It was intentional. So it's like very searchable under my name.
Got it. Okay.
Definitely actor, artist, student. I mean, there's so many.
Yes.
We would just be sitting here.
That's right. I've asked somebody who knows you really well, and the word activist came out. Would you identify yourself as an activist?
I would say I'm an advocate for sure. I'm not sure if I've done quite enough to deserve that title, but
you're still young. So there's a lot that you can go after, right? And do a lot more once you become older. But overall, what do you feel passionate about? Like, what kind of issues do you fight for?
Definitely adoption, LGBTQ plus issues, which is where a lot of my acting and filmmaking work has sort of centered around
Mhm.
recently. Those would definitely be the two biggest things.
Because it personifies who you are, right? In a way
Yes.
too. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of like a good transition in talking about films that you have made. And let's talk about your short films that are released this month.
This doesn't really count because it was released on May 28th.
Close enough.
Yeah. But there was a film called Keith, which I did, and it's 5 minutes long
Mhm.
only. And it's just me the whole time.
Mhm.
And I had to do a lot of like crazy things that I've not really done before. It was very uncomfortable, but like a good discomfort that,
Mhm.
the kind that allows you to grow and
Yes.
deepen your humanity, like having to cry in the shower
Mhm.
and also crying on cue
Yes,
in
that's
the
a
middle
hard
of a
move.
take. And, playing someone who was dealing with a death,
Mhm.
grieving. And then there was Pink, Purple, and Blue, which was released June 4th.
Mhm.
And this one I really went against type because I played a brother who was not supportive
Mm.
when his sister comes out to him
Mhm.
as bisexual. I shouldn't say what happens, but it's bad.
And I think it's great that you kind of take on different roles, even though you in real life, that's not who you are, but that's what all acting is about. And being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoe, makes you a
Yes,
much stronger person because there's very different perspectives in life. Everybody has different opinions.
right. I mean, I sort of got to do a little bit of that in Blue Girl as well.
Yes.
That's one thing I love about acting is that you just get exposed to so many different types of characters, and no matter how like awful they may seem on the
Yeah.
surface and how many flaws they may have, you do have to find a way to empathize with the character
Hmm.
and to understand their reasoning behind whatever they do,
Hmm.
or understand what created the flaws that they have in their lives. And I think that's really allowed me, again, to deepen my humanity and
Yeah.
my understanding of people, learning to see good inside of people that don't seem very good on the surface. And
Hmm.
it's, the kind of people that you just look at and it's very easy to just dismiss them
Yeah.
as bad people and only pay attention to their flaws.
Hmm. Well, you sound so wise at your age already. No, it's very true because I feel like, even growing up, it's very easy to judge, especially in this day and age. I feel like, especially with social media, everything online, you
Yes,
see
it's
a
very easy.
comment, right? And you're like, oh my God, this person, this and that. So you right away, people tend to judge, but you don't even know what they went through, the background they have been through and everything,
Yes.
right?
It's also very easy to surround yourself, especially with the media and social media and all, to just surround yourself with only people who agree with you,
Yeah.
to not listen to other people's perspectives.
Hmm. Agree. And I think you grow when you actually have friends in your circle who have a different perspective. Because
Yes,
otherwise, that's all you know, right? One little circle. But the world
right.
is so much bigger. And that's why I love it that, and you mentioned in the last episode, you travel too, right? You go to different cultures and countries and experience it. And now I love that you intentionally try to play different roles, somebody who's complete opposite of who you are. So that's amazing. Kudos to you for willing to step out of your comfort zone and take on some challenges. I applaud you
Oh,
for that.
thank you.
We talked about Pink, Purple, and Blue, and you have another one coming out in June, right?
Yes, it's called Blue Girl 2025. It is the sequel to my film Blue Girl, and it takes place 5 years later in
Hmm.
2025,
Mm.
which is interesting because it was filmed in 2021.
Yes.
So that was a challenge because none of us really knew. I mean, you can't tell the future. You don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years.
Hmm.
So having to create that reality, knowing that we could be entirely wrong, was quite a challenge.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to take a risk, right? It's your interpretation
Absolutely.
of what 2025 could look like.
Yeah.
What inspired you overall to create your films?
I would say my biggest inspiration for film comes from my acting, actually. Understanding the impact that a lot of the parts that I've played have actually had on developing myself
Hmm.
as a person, especially given that I started acting seriously, when I was 10.
Yes.
A lot of formative years in my life in which I grew with these characters.
Hmm.
And so I think being able to create that for other people is something that really drew me to film.
Yes, that's great. Making movies, especially during COVID times, have been challenging. And we talked about some of the challenge before. But let's talk about the positive and the rewarding part. What has been really rewarding of putting yourself out there and being hard at work and following your passion, Kabir?
Being exposed to an international cast
Hmm.
through filming virtually has
Yes.
been a big positive for me. COVID-19 has also allowed me the time to sit back and to sort of train harder. I've gotten back into taking more serious acting classes,
Hmm.
developing my craft in that sense. And it's given me the time to work on my demo reels, get new headshots, and do all these things to take my career forward
Hmm.
that I may not have had the time for.
That's
Um,
true. School is challenging, it's lots of work.
I wouldn't say school has really been a big impediment, actually.
Oh, good for you. Most of the students I speak with, it's like, oh my God, school's so busy, da 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 da, and the homework. So that's great that you have this attitude about school. I love it.
Well, school can be busy, but I probably spend more time on my acting every week than school.
I love it. Lucky you, lucky you.
Yeah, because with a career like this where, there isn't a steady paycheck, there
Yeah.
isn't like a traditional educational path where like you get your law degree and then you can practice law,
Hmm.
or you get your doctorate and then you can practice medicine or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And because it's so unreliable, if it's something you can be talked out of, it's really not the type of career for you,
Yeah.
because you have to have a certain amount of craziness
Yes.
in order to do something like this. I took a class with someone who said acting is a sickness and you have to be very sick. And I'm quite sick.
That's awesome.
So,
A bug bit you, right, at a very young age.
yeah,
What I feel a lot of teens are missing is knowing what their passion is. That's step number one. Because I talk to a lot of kids and they're like, I don't know what like it's a typical question, right? I'm like an auntie to many, and it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's always, I don't know. But for those who know, step two is also having the courage to pursue it, no
right.
matter how many obstacles you encounter.
Yes. And pursuing it means making sacrifices.
Yes.
Steve Harvey, I think, said this very well. I'm going to butcher this, but I'll try. You can see the next level of where you want to be because it's a glass ceiling. But in
Yeah.
order to break through a glass ceiling, you have to cut yourself. You're
That
going
is
to
very
get
good.
cut
Yeah, it's
by the
hurting.
glass in
Uh-huh.
order to break the ceiling.
Oh, I love that actually.
And those cuts are going to be sacrifices. They're going to be losses of something that seems very important. It's going to be
Mhm.
a big sacrifice. And if you are not willing to make that sacrifice to go in the direction that you want to go, then maybe it's not the direction you want to go. Because if you are passionate enough,
Mhm.
then you have to find a way to break through the glass ceiling.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote, and I don't know if you ever heard about Randy Pausch,
Yeah,
but you've heard about Randy Pausch,
a little.
the author of the last lecture, and also he had a YouTube video of his last lecture because he
Hmm.
was diagnosed with cancer and he was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he leveraged his platform as a professor there because after a class normally they have what they call the last lecture. In general, they use this platform to kind of summarize what they've learned in the class for the students, but he used it at the same time to kind of leave his legacy for his very young children at that point. It was not about poor me, I'm sick, I'm dying, but it was more about life and what your passion are and what you should fulfill in living life without regret. And he mentioned walls are there for reasons, right?
Right.
They put a wall there, and that's like obstacles, challenges we go through in life to show you how badly you really want something. Just
Yes,
just as a similar picture, if you really
absolutely.
care, you climb that wall, break that wall, you'll find way to make it disappear so you can go
Yes,
through. But if it stops you, maybe it's not for you. And I really believe that.
absolutely.
So that's
Yeah,
great.
I mean, in order to keep going,
Hmm.
there are people that I've cut out of my life for whatever reason, toxic relationships,
Yeah.
not being supportive, whatever. There are activities that weren't getting me where I needed to be, which I had to cut out. I did go to high school with this idea. I want to get a 4.0 GPA, all of
Hmm.
that. And as I've started to find success, that was an idea that I cut.
Mm.
And
Yeah, you don't have
I
to
don't,
finish perfect as long as you finish.
right. No, I don't get the best grades in my class. That was a sacrifice that I made because I knew that if I was going to be an actor, having a great portfolio and great experience and great connections and having the perseverance is going to be more beneficial to me than getting a 4.0 GPA in high school.
Hmm. Hmm. Even though I'm a parent, I love my kids' 4.0 GPAs, but I agree with you that school is not everything.
Right.
And I agree with you. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. And you know, I had to learn too because I'm perfectionist somewhat, not quite. So
Hmm.
I always want to put my best foot forward, right? Especially nowadays with social media. People only show their products or share with people when it's done or when it's complete. But I always feel like I've changed my mentality in the recent years to say, you know what? It's okay. I'm not perfect. And I want to encourage people to just put their foot forward and fight for what they believe in and what they care about by showing your imperfect self, right? And there's always the 80-20 rule. Even though I want straight A's, even for myself in life, the equivalent to be really good at everything. But sometimes I just have to say 80% is good enough in this particular area because it's not worth the extra effort to be perfect because
Right.
I'd rather spend my time doing something that really matters to me. But for school, I
Yes.
always say at least, finish it, but really focus on what matters to you because life is short. So I
Yeah.
think you're so wise. Do you read books or where do you get all this wisdom from such a young age?
Part of it is just going along and the ability of letting go.
I didn't learn that until my 20s or 30s. That's why I'm really impressed with that you already have this breakthrough of thinking. That's amazing.
Mhm. Right. Like I still want my high school diploma, and that is not something that I have let go. Whether I have a 4.0 GPA or not is not going to make me a better actor.
Hmm.
It's not going to get me into an audition room. So why put in all the time for that when there are other things that could take me a lot further?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm in awe of you know what you want and you just go for it. And
Right.
I wish I had that because I was a confused teenager myself. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm one of those. And I'm sometimes at my age right now, I'm still figuring it out. I have friends who say the same thing when we talk about that. They're like, I don't know. They're like in their 40s, 50s. Sometimes they say, I still don't know what I want to do. Right. And that's okay. But the sooner you feel like you have an idea of, hey, I really enjoy this, you can make it happen. Just keep
Right.
fighting. Like, like you said earlier, Kabir, it's really important to know what sacrifices you're willing to make to get to your goal. So I love
Right.
that. That's amazing.
Right.
Let's talk about social issues a little bit more. And I know you decided to use a platform of short films for now to raise awareness for what you feel very passionate about. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I think with that, it really depends on the project. With Keith, it was really about destigmatizing, first of all, having a male lead
Hmm.
who cries and gets emotional,
Yes.
and, destigmatizing like men getting emotional and men reaching out to
Oh
others
my God, these are
to
great
help
ones.
them
Yeah,
deal with their emotions. Um,
I love that.
yeah. And Pink, Purple, and Blue was really specifically to address the invisibility around bisexuality and also addressing this mindset that a lot of people have that you're either straight or you're gay.
Hmm.
And if you're straight, that's a good thing. If you're gay, you need help. And bisexuality is just a phase.
That's a good
I
point.
play someone in that film who
Hmm.
has that exact mindset.
Hmm.
Blue Girl 2025 was sort of continued off of Blue Girl and just a general stride for LGBTQ plus rights and equality, and also focusing on intersectionality, having a female lead,
Hmm.
a lesbian, and also having another character in the film, Chloe, a supporting character who comes out towards the end. And, I think the great thing about Chloe, even though the part isn't very big,
Hmm.
is the message, I think, from that character that there are people in our lives that are right in front of us who we really love and like and care about and
Hmm.
enjoy, who we may not realize identify on the LGBTQ plus spectrum,
Yes.
while certain people talk negatively about the LGBTQ plus community and express hatred and tell homophobic jokes and even commit acts of violence,
Yeah.
may have people in their own lives who identify as the very thing that they are fighting against.
Yes, I think that's such a good point because if you have friends who are not supportive, you will not let them know, right? And let's talk
Right.
about that a little bit more because I feel like our audience who are teens and young adults, right? They're entering the stage where this topic comes up a lot. And there will be a time in their lives when a friend might come out to them and share information.
Yes.
What is your suggestion for a teenager that's listening right now when a friend says, I have to talk to you and shares that deep secret they've been holding for several years? What is your advice of how they should best react?
Well, first of all, everyone will react differently.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's like a one size fits all
Yes.
because every person is different. Every friendship is different.
Mhm.
Every relationship is different. But I think voicing support is very important.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what it is that they're talking about, because I've come out to a lot of people and they're just like, what is that? Like,
Mm.
how do you identify? Don't put it on the person who's coming out to educate you.
Mm. Okay. Good point.
Um, you can use Google, you can read books, and really try to understand their identity. I think knowing and understanding and being aware is a crucial first step.
Yes.
I think a lot of people who don't support the LGBTQ plus community don't really understand what it is.
Yes, I agree with you. I have to admit, when I was younger, because I was raised very in the dark, I mean, I think Asian community, you don't talk about this topic. It's very taboo. As I grew up, didn't hear anything about it. And I think it took me a while. Like I was an older teenager or even a young adult by the time it kind of clicked. So I agree with you. I was very confused. And I had friends, actually, I remember in high school, and I've been in school with her for years. And I didn't know, but when she wrote me a letter for the first time, I did not know how to react. I guess if I remember correctly, it was more shock, but I had no reaction. And I don't think that was the right way for me to react, but I didn't know any better because I was not taught, I was not aware. So when teenagers who are listening right now, right, they want to help their friends in the future. And you mentioned earlier about getting educated. What's a good way to get educated?
There is Google search, YouTube, and I'll also suggest a few websites. There's Glisten, GLAD, Stomp Out Bullying, Gender Spectrum,
Okay,
just to name a few.
great. So just to visit those websites and read up on what it shares with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that's very unfortunate is that a lot of schools, a lot of teachers whose job it is to educate young people, from preschool all the way until doctorate or however far they decide to go, they choose not to talk about these issues
Hmm.
and to leave people in the dark, which is a real disservice, I think, to not just to the LGBTQ plus community, but also to the students,
Yeah.
the people who need to be exposed to these kinds of things.
Hmm. I feel like you brought up really good issues overall. I feel like it's challenging for the teachers. I can understand it from their perspective because they are actually hired to teach math, teach English, teach science, but not so sure what their role is about teaching this very important subject, right? And I know for my kids, I think they just learned from their friends who talk about it, and also a little bit from some teachers who might identify with the community themselves, and they came out actually sharing with the students. Based on my community, some of the teachers, I would say even outside of school, could be your sports coach, it could be your dance teacher, it could be your acting teacher, it could be any type of extracurricular activity teacher. And some of them identify with it completely. And that's how I think a lot of teenagers find out and learn more. And then they say, oh, wait, these are just human beings, right? There's nothing different
Right,
about them.
right. There's a phrase that I heard a lot in elementary and middle school: windows and mirrors, seeing ourselves reflected in
Hmm.
other people. And I think for a lot of LGBTQ plus students, especially those whose parents may not be supportive of their identity or they're just not out to their parents yet,
Hmm.
that it's really important for them to have people in their lives that they know they can look to for guidance,
Hmm.
and that they know that their identity is reflected in that person. Obviously, if a teacher's not ready to come out, I'm not going to be that type of person. They're not obligated to come out or
Yeah,
anything.
nobody has to tell you anything. That's how they believe it at their time when they're comfortable.
Right. But, when a teacher is ready, I think it's really great for their students to hear it, that there is an adult in my life that I can look up to
Hmm.
who I know will support and understand me.
Yeah. And for some of the teenagers who listen, who might exactly be in that situation you mentioned, when they grow up, becoming a teenager and turning into an adult, those are confusing years, period. Right? You're trying to figure out who you are, what you want to do, and you're kind of not a kid anymore, but not quite an adult yet. So very confusing years. I remember my own. And let's say they kind of feel like maybe I am part of that community, maybe I'm not sure. And you said finding support is very important, right? And you mentioned a few websites earlier to do research. Will those websites also be able to kind of provide you with a community and maybe somebody else to talk to?
They definitely have resources listed on those websites. I would say for someone looking for support at any age, really, first of all, if you're a student and your school has an
Mhm.
affinity group or anything of the sort, for LGBTQ plus students. I know my school has one and it's completely anonymous. So
Mm-hmm.
anyone who goes to that group, their names are not shared anywhere else. There's no group picture for the yearbook or
Mm-hmm.
anything that would out anyone in that group who wanted to remain anonymous.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And so if anyone else has a group like that at their school, then you can go there and you will be completely anonymous. And the only ones who will know will be others who also identify at your school as LGBTQ plus.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a little more open and your school has a queer straight alliance, these groups are open to straight students and they may not be as anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be for people who are a little more willing to talk about their experience with queerness, then that would be a good option to find support. And
Okay.
then you can also find support from straight students
Absolutely.
and know that there's an allyship there. There are also like local community groups. Some of them require parental permission if you're under 18. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them don't. So if you don't want to come out to your parents, then find the ones that don't.
Yeah.
And I know, again, this isn't as anonymous because it's online. Nothing online is ever
Nope.
anonymous.
Yep.
But there are like online chat groups, hashtags on social media, Facebook groups, things like that. Again, only do that if you are comfortable with being publicly identified
Mm-hmm.
as a queer person. And if you are, those would be great spaces to join. I mean, the list goes on and on. There
Yeah.
are lots of different groups and forums for people.
Thanks for sharing this, Kabir, because I feel like it's really important, especially like I said earlier, as you're trying to find your identity, as you're trying to figure out who you are, no matter what kind of aspects in life, it's so important to have a support group, so important to have somebody to talk to who shares the same troubles. I always feel like a lot of my friendships that are stronger is because we went through some common misery. Whether it was uncomfortable at work or whatever it is, but we had something in common that we could talk about and we felt the same
Yeah.
way, right? So really sharing with somebody. So don't go through it by yourself. That's my message really for our
Yes.
listeners. You are not alone. Find somebody. And of course, you need to feel comfortable. You need to trust that person or the group, right? If you don't feel comfortable, look for another one. But I would really take initiatives and go out there, go on the internet
Yes.
to do a search, like Kabir said, look at your school, what do they offer? But go out and find somebody or group to talk to, because going through things alone is not fun and it's very
Yeah.
lonely, I would say.
And I will say this because I know a lot of people upon coming out to their families get kicked to the curb and they are left with nothing. So I really think it's important for me to name that usually there are, depending on where you live and how supportive the community and what the politics are like where a person is, there are often shelters for people who have been, for youth who are kicked out by their parents or, runaways or neglected or anything like that. A lot of these shelters and places help get you off the ground.
That's
And
amazing.
so I would just like to name that. I also want to name Trevor and other suicide hotlines for LGBTQ plus people who are thinking of killing themselves because either they're ashamed or other people are not supportive or for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
that there are hotlines that can help you, again, that are completely anonymous and that don't need parental consent
Mm-hmm.
or anything of the sort.
Yes. And I think beauty of a hotline is you don't know the person on the other side, they don't know who you are. And because of this, it's like you feel comfortable, right? Sometimes you need a stranger to share something with, because they can't pinpoint what school you go to, where you live, and who your parents are. So you could just let it all out, right? And just get the support and somebody to listen to sometimes, just as simple as that. So thanks for sharing that. I want to know specifically, you talked about what you like and, what you're passionate about, but what are your hopes and dreams for your future? And what inspires you to accomplish them?
I guess the biggest reason that I do all the things that I do is for the opportunity to sort of play all these different types of people who are real, who aren't just a type, and really exploring the life within a character that on the surface may seem like they're just one thing, which goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the podcast when we were talking about all of these different hats that we wear.
That's right.
All of these different words that we use to associate ourselves with. I think being able to portray that, being able to direct other people portraying that, being able to express a shared humanity that we all have is very important to me.
Yeah, that's great. So 10, 20 years from now, you're still going to be acting and behind the camera and creating movies, right?
Oh, I hope so.
You will. I have, really high hopes for you. So I expect you to see you on a big screen one day. That's amazing. But being a teenager yourself, right? I'm still young. And I wanted, especially the last few years, I think we've been going through it for years, but there's a lot of uproar in our different communities, right? Whether it's ethnicity or politics, there's just so much going on.
Right.
And as somebody who's more engaged than the average teenager, I would say, what suggestions do you have for other teens and young adults, how they can get more involved with their community and make change? Not just sit back passively and say, I'll complain and then say, I wish this and that, but what can they do to take initiative to be part of that change?
First of all, for people, teenagers and young adults who have already figured out what it is that they're passionate about, really think about how you can use that passion for change. And one thing you can do, and I know this is cliche, but attending the marches, attending the protests, these events succeed and make change because of strength in numbers. And if people don't show up for what they believe in, then they're just taking themselves sort of out of that event, out of that opportunity to make change.
Yeah.
And also not just who you're voting for, like on an election ballot, but also, we vote with our dollar. And we also vote with our time. Who do we follow on social media? Who do we engage with on social media? And what do they stand for? Who do we support? What businesses do we purchase from? And what do they stand for? Where do we go to eat, get drink? All of these daily things that we do.
Yeah.
Thinking about where we should invest that money, given what each business stands for and what their values are, and whether they are in alignment with your values, what you want for the world, the type of change that you want to make.
Amazing. I feel like what Kabir mentioned to us, and that's what I wanted to emphasize on, change that you make, our listeners make, doesn't have to be big. You don't have to be like, oh my God, I cannot start an organization. I don't have money. I'm not old enough. I don't have a title. I don't have authority. But the little things you can do, right? At least make aware of your opinion. Use your voice. I think I had this discussion with another podcast guest before. Your voice is so important. Like Kabir said, vote not just in elections, but also with your time, right? Who you follow, money, where you spend it, and do little things like joining a rally. I think that's such important advice. And that's a great way for our listeners to get engaged.
There's no reason why you couldn't do something bigger if that's what you really want to do. It's, there are obstacles in life that we all face that seem insurmountable sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's an issue that you're really, really passionate about, then you have to find a way to overcome whatever obstacle that is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make a big change. There are a lot of teenagers who inspire movements like the Parkland shooting survivors just through social media and through going online and having discussions about the issues in our world.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put that out there. Yes, do the little things. And if you want to go further, you are not limited to doing those little things.
Good point. If you want to take it all the way, go for it. But if you're
Yes.
afraid it's too much of an obstacle, start small and grow from
Right.
there, right?
Right.
That's a message. So to wrap up our podcast today, where can our listeners find more information about you? And if they're interested to watch your short films, where can they find it?
You can find me on Twitter and Facebook at Kabir MCN, Kabir MCN. You can find me on Instagram at Kabir McNeely, my full name,
Mm-hmm.
Kabir MCNEELY. And I'm on YouTube as well, same name. It's fairly easy if you Google me to find all of this out.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for spending time with us, Kabir. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I have to say, I learned things from you, even though you're decades younger, but I learned a lot from you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed our interview with Kabir McNeely and learned a little bit more about how you can understand and support the LGBTQ plus community. Check out Kabir's award-winning short films on his YouTube channel, Kabir McNeely, where you can also find Keith, Pink, Purple, and Blue, as well as Blue Girl 2025, as we discussed earlier in this episode. And here's my challenge to you today. If you feel like you're not too informed about the LGBTQ plus community, go ahead and do some research on sites that Kabir suggested just to familiarize yourself, or reach out for help if you feel like you might be on the spectrum but just feel very confused and alone. Just know there's others there for you. And thanks again for spending time with us today, and we'll talk to you in the next episode. Have an amazing day.